Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is rotation-proof Esper Control for core set 2019. But technically, it's going to be after rotation, so Guilds of Ravnica, we'll say that. Alright, so this was kind of a challenging, but not really that challenging build for a control deck in the more standard rotation environment. Keep in mind, a lot of the actual control deck lists may not be changing that much once Guilds of Ravnica comes out, since they're not kind of focusing on Azorius and those kind of colors as much in the first Guilds of Ravnica set. So we're really kind of looking at what we have in standard right now as far as a control deck moving forward. And of course, Teferi is in this deck. Teferi is the best control card in all of Magic right now as far as standard goes. So let's get into the deck list, guys, and talk about what we have. Starting with our creatures, we've got Lyra Dawnbringer and Azor the Lawbringer. Dawnbringer, they're two bringers of wins here, basically. 3 total in creatures. Dawnbringer is a great creature for us, a 5-mana 5/5 flying first strike lifelinker. Gives other angels you control +1/+1 and lifelink. That's not really relevant to us. What's relevant to us is playing this on turn 10 or 11 and swinging in 4 times to close out a game. Lawbringer does something similar, but it does help us against a more aggro or creature-based matchup where we really need to gain some life back and get some footing back into our hand, or cards back into our hand. Get our footing, basically. Being able to, kind of come back from behind against a more aggro-based matchup. A 6-mana 6/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. This helps us against a top deck contempt, helps us against any kind of top deck removal or any kind of sorcery speed removal on their side as well. Of course, it doesn't hit any kind of enchantments or anything like that, so seal away or cast out or something like that. It's not going to be able to stop those things, but at the same time, instant and sorcery speed removal is great, being able to shut that down on their turn. Then whenever Azor attacks, we can pay X, white, and 2 blue, and if we do, we gain X life and draw X cards. So lots of mana dumping into Azor here, but with Teferi on the battlefield, Azor is actually not bad at all. We could basically say this is X and 1 white and blue, or 1 white or 1 blue, whichever one you want to do it. Basically 1 and X, and being able to get in for taps and draws and life gain as well. So again, both of these cards represent lots of damage in the air, which is very, very good for us against most matchups. And both of them represent lifelink damage with Dawnbringer and life gain and card advantage with Lawbringer. So very, very good there for creatures. Let's move on to our spells here, or Planeswalkers first, and talk about that. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Obviously, this is going to be in the deck. It's a complete 4 if we have to have it in the deck. I did consider putting Karn, Sign of Urza in the deck list, but Karn just doesn't do that much right now in Standard. It's not that he's bad at all. It's just that he doesn't do enough for me to really facilitate him being in the deck list. He's very good at card advantage, but nowadays we have cards like Anticipate in the rotation proof list, so Karn's okay, but not amazing. But Teferi is amazing. A 5-mana 4 loyalty +1 draw a card at the beginning of the next end step. Untap 2 lands. That's ridiculous. Now, this is an AME ability, which means if you don't tap your lands on MTGO, it's going to ask you to tap your opponent's lands, or untap your opponent's lands, which could be kind of bad. -3, put target non-land permanent onto its owner's library, 3rd from the top. Good removal. And -8, which is the way you win with Teferi here. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent and opponent controls. So basically putting your opponent really far behind to the point where they just can't catch up anymore, and that's going to be the GG. But that's it for all the Planeswalkers. Let's move on to our spells here. We've got Syncopate, Anticipate, Cast Down, and Essence Scatter. Since there are so many creatures going on in Standard right now, we have Cast Down and Essence Scatter for those. Anticipate, because there really isn't that good of card draw after rotation happens, so Anticipate's amazing for us here. The last time this was printed was probably the Khans of Tarkir block, I believe. It's been a while. As far as Anticipate goes, very good card. And Syncopate is here as a great way to get rid of any kind of spell that has recurring, coming back from the graveyard. An X in blue, counter target spell unless its controller plays X, and if they can't, it's countered and it gets exiled, which is amazing. Syncopate's worse as the longer the match goes on, so it's very good in your opening hand, but very bad on turn 7 or 8, unless you just really want to tap out for while they tap out for something. Cast Down, though, super good against Steel Leaf Champion, Goblin Chain Whirler, things like that, where we know that it's not a legendary creature, it's going to come down, and we need to get rid of it as soon as possible. That's what Cast Down's for. Same thing for Essence Scatter as well. Moving on, we have Gideon's Reproach, Negate, Golden Demise, and Stellar Wreckage. Again, lots of creature removal here. Gideon's Reproach is actually really good against Steel Leaf Champion because it does 4 points of damage to its 4 toughness, and same thing for Goblin Chain Whirler, just being able to handle those kind of high-level creatures that we're going to see on turn 3 for our opponents, or turn turn 2 if they're in mono green. Negate is also very good at getting rid of those hard to deal with kind of removal spells like Cast Out, or Ixalan's Binding, something like that, as well as maybe Approach if they have Approach deck right now. Golden Demise is good against the token-based strategy, as well as the Black-White Knights deck. Doing -2/-2 across the board is great, and if opponents are playing against or are playing with Heroic Intervention right now, Golden Demise still kills their creatures. And so, one of Settle the Wreckage, since we have so many spot removal cards, just having a one of board wipe card is okay as well, because Settle the Wreckage does give your opponent lots of mana if they are swinging in with a lot of creatures. Next up, we have a 1, or actually 4 of Vraska's Contempt here. This is the one that's probably the most expensive besides Teferi in the deck list. Vraska's Contempt is a must-need card, though, against all of the other like mirror matches as far as Teferi decks and other control decks, but also against really good aggro strategies like Glorybringer, Rekindling Phoenix, especially Rekindling Phoenix, since it does exile the card and they do not get it back. A 4-mana instant, exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. The 2 life gain may not be significant to you, but it is very significant in the grand scheme of things, especially because we have so few cards in the deck list that gain us life against an aggro matchup. Moving on from spells, though, we have enchantments. We have 4 or 3 in total, just 1 as far as enchantments itself, but 3 in total. Search for Azcanta, 2-mana legendary enchantment. This is really good on turn 2, being able to kind of filter through our deck if we need to get lands, or if we need spells, or if we need our win condition like a Lyra Dawnbringer, or a Lawbringer, or a Teferi. So very good. Does flip into a land after we hit 7 cards in our graveyard if we want to, and a great way for us to hunt into another non-creature land or non-creature card as well. So Search for Azcanta is super good for us in the early game and amazing in the mid to late game if opponent does not have a Field of Ruin. But that's it for all the cards in the main board. Let's go to lands real quickly. We have Swamp, Plains, Island, and then 4/4/4 of Glacial Fortress, Drowned Catacomb, and Isolated Chapel. This is Esper, so it's white, black, and blue, and there's 25 lands in total. We have to hit a land almost every single turn if we want this deck to kind of go off the way we want to. Moving on to the sideboard here, we have Negate, Seal Away, Golden Demise once again, and Invoke the Divine, basically bringing in the 4th Negate here for the mirror match. Seal Away here for the more aggro match. The mono-red strategy is very, very good against us. And Seal Away is also good against the mono-green strategy as well. Golden Demise is coming in for those monument strategies around right now, as well as Black-White Knights. Just a very good card overall. And Invoke the Divine is here for if there's their Godfrey's Gift strategy, if there's a vehicle strategy going around messing up our situation, or if there's a lot of enchantments in our opponent's deck, we want to bring in Invoke the Divine to deal with that, to make sure Teferi can stay on the battlefield long enough to go for Emblem. Next up for sideboard for us as well, we have the Hieromancer's Cage, Settle the Wreckage, 2 more of them, another Lawbringer, and 2 Chromium the Mutable. Chromium here is amazing for us in the mirror match. Just ridiculous as far as if opponent has lots of removal, especially if they're on Rakdos, burn. Chromium is very good in that particular list as well. Azor is only good again for the mirror match or for a more more mid-range strategy, good at doing stuff like that. Settle the Wreckage is here for more mono red aggro or mono green aggro strategies, and the Cage is here for non-land permanent removal as well for our opponent. And the last 2 cards in the sideboard here is actually Nezahal Primal Tide, another great card to bring in along with Chromium for the mirror match. Basically, we're giving ourselves a couple more options for us to win the match. Instead of using a Teferi, if opponent can get rid of that easily, we go with Nezahal or Chromium, being able to blink Nezahal if we need to, draw some cards with Nezahal as well, and also Chromium being able to get in like 7 points of damage too. So these guys on the battlefield are just ridiculous. They can definitely win a match quickly and are great against control decks. But that is the full 75, folks. Let's go to the deck list here. On MTGO Traders, if you want to build this, is coming to about 244 tickets. This is kind of where the point where, the online prices are kind of getting closer to the paper prices, because if you want to build this on paper, it's coming to about $388. So basically saying that, control ain't cheap. And this is probably the best control deck after rotation, unless Ravnica really does add something important to it. But so far, I'm not really seeing that much as far as wanting to take out or add. I think right now, though, Esper Control is super powerful and has a good way to go at being one of the best decks in Standard once the mono-red aggro deck kind of rotates from the format. I think mono-green's still going to be a very good force to be reckoned with in Standard, but I do think Esper Control is going to be coming up from out of the woodwork and just doing a lot of damage against the field right now. All right, guys, let's get into our matches here and see what we can do with Esper Control Rotation Proof. First up against our deck list is a green-white aggro list. Super interesting. Fought back the entire game. A very, very difficult game for us. We go with a turn to Anticipate. Probably should have gone with a Search for Azcanta, but go for a Gideon's Reproach off that. and then pass the turn here. Second land for opponent, Burmat Courier and another Courier, and then they slam in for 3 on turn 2. So we know they're definitely on aggro, waiting for that red man if we ever see it. Go for Search for Azcanta. Have Contempt and Reproach in hand, so we do have good removal in our hand. This Esper Control list does have a lot of good removal. Shayna hitting the battlefield, as well as, I think, another one. Yeah, Encampment Keeper. Shayna being a 5/5. Had to reread the ability here, but it's can't be the target of abilities your opponents control. So that means that our spells can definitely target Shayna. We have Negate off the top there. We pitch that to the graveyard to get another Contempt, which is awesome. Because again, Contempt gains us 2 life, and getting hit with a bunch of 1/1s here is super good for us because it means that we're actually going to be able to hold our own for a while they continue to build board state. Adorned Pouncer and Fanbearer, they're out of cards in hand, and they're just swinging in for alphas now, which is fine by me. We have a good removal in our hand at 16, dropping us down to 12 with this swing here. And getting into a Syncopate, throwing that into the graveyard, looking for our creatures if we can. Vraska's Contempt against that Adorned Pouncer has to be the move here since it is a double striker. Encampment Keeper is another card we don't like as well because it can be pumped and be a huge creature, or a huge threat as well. Wish we had 1 extra mana for this Gideon's Reproach, but we'll use that next turn, probably on the Encampment Keeper or a Courier. Attacking in once again for 5 points of damage, getting us down to 9. We really need to get into some board wipe. We have Golden Demise in the deck, mind you. Throwing land into the graveyard, playing another land, have Essence Scatter and Reproach with Syncopate. So we have 2 counters and then a removal spell for the board state. 2 cards in opponent's hand, Vanguard off the top. We go Essence Scatter for that Vanguard just to get rid of it. Remember, that's a way for them to gain life as well and make it a 2/2 since they have more than 3 creatures. Swinging in once again for 5 points of damage here. We don't have Settle the Wreckage. Wish we did that turn, but we're going to go Gideon's Reproach on the Encampment Keeper and take 4 points of damage, dropping us down to 5. And it all kind of looks like all hope is lost here for us. We go for the Search for Azcanta, find a Negate, pitch that to the graveyard, flip Azcanta, and find a Golden Demise. Awesome. That clears the entire board state. We can finally start back from scratch. Opponent has 2 cards in hand, but they don't find any kind of creature this turn. We go with a Search for Azcanta on our instep here to hunt for answers. Find a Settle the Wreckage, another great card for us, and an Isolated Chapel off the top. So we have 2 white mana now. And pass turn here. Syncopate being a great way to shut down any kind of big creature coming our way. Azcanta instep here, hunting for a removal spell. We go Cast Down or Anticipate, grab it, Anticipate, go Anticipate, hunt for a Teferi. And pass turn. Golden Demise we draw into once again, so we've got plenty of removal now. We've got Teferi hitting the battlefield, and we're actually turning this match around at 5 life. Cannot believe we actually did this. Passing the turn back, untapping some lands, and saying, okay, we have Syncopate, we have Settle. You know, it really doesn't matter what they do now. We're basically set for the rest of the game. 4 cards, or third card in their hand, Fanbearer, 4 men on the battlefield. We let it hit without syncopating it. We draw a card with the Teferi, hit another Teferi. So interesting for us there. And decide to go with a pass turn here. Now we should have probably syncopated the Fanbearer, but syncopating a 1-mana creature is a little frustrating for us. 3 cards in hand for opponents. They're going to go for an attack and try and hit Teferi here. So we could either go with a Settle the Wreckage here or just let it hit our Teferi. We actually want to go Settle here because we want to make sure Teferi starts ticking up turn over turn. And give them 1 free mana, so they're actually up to 5 here. Passing turn, hitting Lyra Dawnbringer, so basically we're in the clear now as far as coming back from this match, since it is a first strike flying, a lifelinker, giving us 5 life once it hits, and passing opponent, back to opponent. And that's basically going to be the game here for us. 4 cards in opponent's hand, do they find anything? And that's going to be doing it. Let's get into sideboard here to see what we can do in game 2. So we take out a Vraska's Contempt, bring in a Settle the Wreckage, and kind of happy with what we have, honestly. Opponent is definitely on an aggro-based strategy, so we want to see if we can outpace them. A 3rd Golden Demise might have been a good idea, but felt really happy about what we had. Making sure we had that 2nd Settle the Wreckage, since we only have 1 in the main board. Kept a 2-lander, playing a tap land here. And opponent didn't play a turn 1 play, which is awesome for us. They didn't play a turn 2 play. Then we go Search for Azcanta. And obviously they're going to have a turn 3 play. We have Essence Scatter in hand, so we are kind of waiting for their giant play here, which is Mentor of the Meek. Now, this is a huge card for them since they have such a low curve. We're going to throw a Negate into the graveyard since it's not that important for this particular matchup. But that's fine. We're going to, lean on Essence Scatters and Settle the Wreckages to get this matchup going. 4 mana on the battlefield, going for a Banalish Marshal. We quickly Essence Scatter that, 4 cards in hand for opponent, and they crash in for 2 here, dropping us down to 18. They actually don't. They don't attack us here. We're still at 20. I thought they did. We're going to keep a Golden Demise into our hand. Just need another black mana for that to happen. And we go with a cast here on Search for Azcanta, knowing that they don't really have anything to do with our enchantments, even though they have green mana. We go for that to make sure the Search for Azcanta can flip even sooner. Toolcraft Exemplar off the top for opponent. We go Essence Scatter, and then they have a second Toolcraft Exemplar, which means they will be able to draw a card with Mentor the Mink's ability here. 3 cards in hand, being able to refill their hand. We've got lots of stuff on the in our hand for dealing with this particular board state. And they go with a Leonin Vanguard here, drawing another card with Mentor the Meek. Search for Azcanta finds a Teferi. We throw it into the graveyard, hit our black mana, and go Golden Demise. We're not going to use that Stellar Wreckage just yet, because Stellar Wreckage is fantastic in the mid to late game against stuff like Adorned Pouncer, a second Adorned Pouncer, exiling them for sure. Glacial Fortress, throwing that to the graveyard, flipping Azcanta, laying a land, and we actually have enough mana here to go for a Teferi cast, draw a card, and hold up Settle the Wreckage. And that is exactly what we're going to do here. So draw into a land here, Isolated Chapel, and untap our 2 plains, or a plains and a Glacial Fortress, I believe. Yeah, just plains, the 2 plains. 2 cards in opponent's hand here from the draw. And instead of actually going for the Stellar Wreckage, they play Shayna here and then attack at Teferi. Now, Teferi doesn't die if they attack with the Pouncers to Teferi, which is fine. We actually set Teferi down to 1. We actually want to make sure Shayna is killed with Stellar Wreckage as well. So we're going to go Azcanta, look for a Anticipate on instep. Draw a card, and got into lots of stuff there as well. Untapping their mana because we forgot to tap our mana. That's how MTGO works. So we've got a removal spell, Settle the Wreckage, and another courier off the top for opponent. So we actually get a fantastic swing against our opponent here. The second time we get to actually clear their board state after a Golden Demise in the early game. Going for a Settle the Wreckage here. 1 card in opponent's hand. We go Settle, and they lose all their cards. Get lots of mana out of that, though. And Teferi continues to stay onto the board. Now we have 4 mana up here for an Anticipate or a Syncopate, so if they have a follow-up play, we definitely have a way to counteract that. I don't think they have one, though. Go Instep, go Anticipate, and hunt for a attacker if we can. Grab a Golden Demise out of that, or Vraska's Contempt. We go Vraska's Contempt instead, thinking they may have a top-end bomb. Hit a Lyra Dawnbringer off of the plus from Teferi. And that basically means we're back in game 1 situation where we have a huge advantage, except we're at 18 life this time instead of 5. So pass back to opponent here, and he really needs something. What does he get off the top here from the draw? Doesn't look like it's going to be much here, and that's going to be doing it for match 1. Nice. So let's get into match 2 here and see what we can do. Spoiler alert, we're up against another aggro list. We go for a mulligan and get into a top deck, swamp bottom that, get Syncopate, Syncopate, and Search for Azcanta. This is green-black aggro, going for Search for Azcanta on turn 2. We have Essence Scatter, probably should have held on to that, because they definitely go for a Thrashing Brontodon, which can kill the Search for Azcanta. But we do get into a Gideon's Reproach, which can kill a Thrashing Brontodon if they attack in. They hit 4 mana here, but since we know that this is green, they definitely have a lot of big things. So we definitely want to hold that Gideon's Reproach for a Steel Leaf Champion. So we let them hit us for 1 here, or for 3. And then they go Steel Leaf Champion. We go quickly Essence Scatter and pass the turn back. Search for Azcanta is on the top. We throw it to the graveyard and lay a land here. Now they can go Instep here, sack Thrashing Brontodon, which I believe that is the play they want to do. Yep, that's what they want to do. Again, Search for Azcanta is just a huge advantage for us against these kind of deck lists where we can hunt for specific removal spells or miss mana if we don't need to. Opponent's tapping out for a Ronas here. We go Essence Scatter on top of that and getting rid of it. Ronas, one of the harder cards to get rid of except for a Vraska's Contempt. Having 3 Syncopates and a Reproach, though, means we're definitely lined up for lots of good removal situations. Another Ronas, we go for another Syncopate. And this one is actually exiled now, since they can't get around that. And 4 cards in opponent's hand. We hit our 3rd Search for Azcanta and pass turn back. So Syncopate is open for us to counter for 1, but they do get around that with a Steel Leaf Champion here. However, Gideon's Reproach is in our hand, so it means that if they do attack out, Gideon's Reproach does deal with that card rather well. 3 cards in their hand now. We go for a Golden Demise, pitch to the graveyard, hit a Lyra Dawnbringer, which means we do just need 5 mana for that Lyra Dawnbringer to be useful to us. So opponent has 4 cards in hand here, kind of expecting a Galta or something of that caliber this turn. That's why Syncopate is in our hands here. Gonna go for a Steel-Leaf Champion attack. We're gonna go Gideon's Reproach, kind of expecting a Blossoming Defense here, and they definitely answer the call with Blossoming Defense. We can't counter that with the Syncopate. They have 4 mana available left to them. They're going to tap out, hit their 5th, tap out, and go for a Galta. And luckily for us, we have Syncopate in hand, and we tap for 1, and a Syncopate for 1x, our X for 1, is able to counteract that Galta. Plains, throw that into the graveyard and flip an Azcanta, then play out a Lyra Dawnbringer, and just finally have good standing position against this aggressive deck list. Opponent has a Ronus on the field as well, 1 more card in hand. And let's see what they have. Another Galta. The second Galta. Of course they have it in their hand. They attack here with Steel-Leaf Champion. Not sure why they did that. We go with a block here to immediately gain some life, going up to 15. Very useful to us. Vraska's Contempt is a card we can use right now if we want to. But instead we go for an Anticipate, looking for something that's a bit different. We could go for the Essence Scatter or Plains. We go for Anticipate again and Anticipate 1 more time. Basically being like, we have removal for Vraska's Contempt, but we want to make sure that you know that we're kind of off our game. So we're going to make sure that an opponent, we get the block on Lyra Dawnbringer. The reason I do this is because Ronus can be pumped to oblivion for this following turn. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to make sure that they use Hashep Oasis for Galta, they sack a land, and then they attack in for 15. I'm not sure why Ronus didn't attack there. Probably should have. We go with the Lyra Dawnbringer block, go down to 10, and then just Vraska's Contempt the Galta here. They have 1 card in hand. They could have had a defense there, but luckily they did not. Go Anticipate, grab an Isolated Chapel, pass turn back to them. Probably would have been a better idea to go Vraska's Contempt as soon as we saw Galta on the battlefield. So, you know, take my advice there. Hit a island there. But since we have Azcanta on the battlefield, we're just going to hunt for some stuff. So we hit Teferi off of that. But we go Vraska's Contempt instead because of the Ronus on the battlefield. We decide to pass turn here, kind of opting for them to play something else to turn Ronus on so that we can continue to get rid of those creatures. But they actually don't play anything. They play land, so we go Vraska's Contempt on Ronus, clearing the battlefield, hitting another Vraska's Contempt, and hitting 4 lands in total with that Azcanta hunt. So backing to our opponent here, 2 cards in hand, 41 cards in their deck overall, and 20 minutes on their clock. Thrashing Brontodon. Now, they could have played that earlier for that Search for Azcanta flip, so now that they don't really have anything, we just go for Azcanta once more and find a Teferi. Really need a 5th land. Can't seem to find a 5th land there. Pass turn back, but we still have the Vraska's Contempt turned on for us for the board state. So they swing in for 3 here. We let it happen, kind of waiting for a main phase 2 creature. Still no creature for them, so we go Vraska's Contempt on the Brontodon. And now we just go for Azor the Lawbringer, bringing this in. A flying 6/6 creature, making sure they can't cast instants and sorcery spells on their next turn. I was thinking they may have had a Vraska's Contempt or something like that on their side. That's why the negate is so useful in our opening hand right here. Greenbelt Rampager coming in and out several times to make sure it hits the battlefield. And one card left in hand. Nothing too extreme right here. We can go for a Teferi this turn if we want to, but I opted to go instead for a Azor the Lawbringer attack, tapping for 3 and drawing 3, gaining 3 life, going up to 16 with this, which is super good for us. Getting a cast down and a Vraska's Contempt. So we actually have good removal here, 2 different ways. Opponent has 2 cards in hand. Wanted to opt to attack. They actually scoop up on the game 1 there, which is nice for us. And we get into sideboard, taking out Golden Demise, bringing in Settle the Wreckage, and thinking about something else maybe. Maybe taking out Teferi for another Azor the Lawbringer, which exactly is what we do. And kind of thinking about maybe the Cage a little bit. Cage could be good for Galta, but I think honestly we're probably fine. So we're just going to go with a Submit and get into game 2 here. Have a decent opening hand with lots of Essence Scatters. But lots of tap lands. So opponent goes with a turn 1 Llanowar Elf, which means that we're probably going to be behind in catching up with their board state. Hashep Oasis from them, going for a Steel-Leaf Champion on turn 2, of course. Playing our Swamp here for a Essence Scatter coming in on whatever they play next. which is a Sorcerer Spyglass. We go for a Syncopate on turn 1 just to tap down the Llanowar Elves for that extra point of damage. Now, one of the things that Sorcerer Spyglass lets you do is turn off things like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, but they instead go for Vraska's Contempt, which Spyglass doesn't hit. I think the opponent didn't truly understand what Spyglass actually did. But nevertheless, this doesn't really affect our momentum in going forward throughout the match. They just kind of see our hand with the Spyglass and then choose Contempt, which doesn't work. Would have been better for them to choose Teferi. Hitting in for 6 here, dropping it down to 9. Main phase 2, another Spyglass, and I believe they name Contempt here. No, they name Essence Scatter. So Contempt and Essence Scatter. So again, another misunderstanding from the opponent. We go with a Planes there, go cast down on the Steel Leaf Champion finally off the top, and pass turn back to the opponent. We're down to 9, so we really have to hit something important soon. Essence Scatter on the Thrashing Brontodon, and pass turn. Now they haven't hit, if you notice, they only have 2 lands on the battlefield. They haven't hit many lands, which means we are winning the land game. So they may have some big stuff in their hand, but they don't have the mana to play it out, which is fine by me. Scrap Heap Scrounger, we actually let that hit because we don't want it to go to the graveyard. We go Vraska's Contempt instead, exiling it to make sure it doesn't come back. And they hit us for 1, so we actually only gain 1 life there. So not too bad as far as a trade-off for me. Hitting Teferi there with 5/6 mana on the battlefield. We're definitely going to go Teferi and use Essence Scatter as a hold-up for the following turn. Not bad at all. And passing back to the opponent here. Again, they've been behind on land the entire game here. 4 cards in their hand here after the draw. Getting into a Steel Leaf Champion. That doesn't stop them from playing important creatures, though, because Steel Leaf Champion is a 5/4. It's just a massive bomb. And if it hits the battlefield, it's going to do a huge amount of damage to us. So, passing back to us now, hitting a Glacial Fortress off the top. Going Island and plussing for Teferi to draw another card. Hitting Search for Azcanta. And we're kind of back in business now. Doing all the stuff that Control wants to do, being able to get card advantage, kind of lining up our plays, and slowly ticking that Teferi up for a ultimate. They hit Llanowar Elf off the top, and then they go for an attack here for Teferi. We could opt to go for Vraska's Contempt, and that's what exactly we do. We gain some 2 life here and pass the turn. Gonna go search for Azcanta, find a Vraska's Contempt, definitely get that, and find a Settle the Wreckage with Teferi there. And untapping lands, we're just gonna untap their land. Not bad. And pass to opponent. So we could go for a Settle the Wreckage or a Vraska's Contemptor. They hit Thrashing Brontodon. We have enough mana to do both things, which is not bad. So they could go for a attack here or hold up for the Thrashing Brontodon sack for the Search for Azcanta. So I'm kind of waiting on the opponent to do that. They decide to not attack this turn. We go for Search for Azcanta, and they exactly go and do what I think they do, which is Search for Azcanta, kill. We still go to 8 on the Teferi there and go Anticipate. Hit a negate or a land if we want to. Hit a negate there. And pass the turn back to the opponent. Again, we still have enough mana to do a search, or Settle the Wreckage and Vraska's Contempt. Greenbelt Rampager hitting the battlefield, and we immediately Rampage or Contempt that. And then opponent tries to attack out the Teferi here. And we're just kind of like, no, you're not going to do that either. We're going to Settle the Wreckage that. So Teferi Emblem is definitely going to go off on the next turn here. We actually hit Azor as well, so we just have like value forever hitting Azor here. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap up the match. All right, let's get into match 3 here. And match 3 is our grindiest matchup. This is going to be kind of a mirror matchup. Opponent is on a blue-white Metallurgic Summonings deck. And we are, of course, Esper Control. So, didn't hit any blue mana in our opening hand. We had a mulligan because of that terrible opening hand. Opponent has a tap land here. This is actually a game lost for us in the opening game here because we really are behind basically the entire game. Not based on our actual land drops and what we have in our deck as far as like Teferi, Lyra Dawnbringer, things like that. But we have too much creature removal, so it kind of fills up our hand and is kind of irrelevant for most of the match. It means that opponent is able to kind of get a lot of value turn over turn as they go throughout the match here. They also have a lot of commit to memory in their deck as well, which is able to reshuffle their deck and put us behind a couple turns as well. Search for Azcanta is helping us, though, in getting us lands onto the battlefield to make sure that we can, slowly kind of get into a good position here. laying land every single turn against a control match is basically the most optimum thing. Opponent goes for a Precognition Field, which is a very strange card. A great way for them, though, to kind of be able to go to win out on counter wars. We get into a negate here, and they are tapped out. We wish we had another land for a Teferi or Lyra Dawnbringer, but we do not. Opponent has 6 cards in hand, laying their 5th land. Kind of was expecting a Teferi or something like that, but didn't see it. Cast down, we're going to throw it to the graveyard, get it and anticipate in return, and slowly try to build that cast down, or search for Azcanta value as it can hopefully flip. Supreme Will for our opponent here is searching for something and putting it into their hand. Passing back to them now, 7 cards in hand, dropping a land, and passing back to me. As you know, the control mirror matches can be a little grindy because we're really kind of looking for the best way to make the situation the most optimal. We pitch cast down to the graveyard, hit another land. Now we have enough for a Lyra Dawnbringer or a Teferi, but we do know that it's going to most certainly be countered. So we want to make sure we play that whenever we have more mana to play a counter war against them. Getting into a syncopate here, laying a land, and passing the turn. So it is kind of a grindy matchup, but it's one of the more rewarding matchups, especially when we notice that the clock starts to run out. Because we're almost at the 20-minute mark now. We really haven't done anything to either player. Threw that Essence Scatter away, got an Azor there. Probably could have played the Azor, but Commit to Memory goes to search for Azcanta, which does put us back a little bit on our instep. We could have gone Negate and Syncopate, but we wanted to make sure that those were held up for whenever we play out Teferi, Lyra Dawnbringer, or Azor. Supreme Will hunting for something else again. 7 cards in opening hand for opponent. Field of Ruin hitting the battlefield for them. So that is a card that can deal with a search for Azcanta or a dual land if they need to. Good way to thin the deck. We hit another search for Azcanta. This is, mind you, a different one than the one they just commit to memory because that's off the top. Going to go for a Evolving Wilds here. And pass back to us. We hit our second search for Azcanta. And hit that on the battlefield. 4 cards, or 4 mana available to us, passing turn back to them. Going to tap out for a Metallurgic Summonings. We have a Negate and a Syncopate open for us. So we go Negate here, and opponent goes for a Anticipate, hunting for another counter. Looks like they haven't found many counters. They go with a Supreme Will, and then we go Syncopate for 1 because they have Evolving Wilds, and they can't sack an Evolving Wilds or tap an Evolving Wilds for mana. We actually win this particular counter war, which is not bad. Metallurgic Summonings hits the graveyard. They're completely tapped out, which gives us the ability to either play Teferi, Lyra Dawnbringer, and Azor. We decide to go for Teferi first, since it is a really good card to handle the situation here. Untapping some land for us, giving us the ability to hold up counters next turn. Which is exactly what we're going to do with a Syncopate here. They go Evolving Wild Sack, hunting for a land, getting a Plains there. 7 cards in hand. Again, all of our hands are just completely full basically the entire time. Field of Ruin to Azcanta. Not to be unexpected there. We go for an island. And just kind of waiting it out once more for the opponent to start getting their stuff put together again. Precognition Field hitting once again. Not very interesting for the opponent. They just kind of probably just want to get it out of their hand. And then we go back to our turn. We go with a draw here. Play Isolated Chapel. Now we're kind of in a situation where we could play Azor or Lyra Dawnbringer and kind of hold up a Syncopate if we wanted to do so. So we go with a Lyra Dawnbringer here and see if opponent has something for that. They have Essence Scatter, and we just go, well, the Syncopate can't really hurt it because they have 3 mana untap. And so we go with untapped land on the Teferi and pass turn. All we're trying to do now is just trying to get their counters out of their hand while we play our kind of game-winning stuff. Memory from the graveyard there, reshuffling the entire deck, having us draw 7 new cards. Opponent going Search for Azcanta off the top. We have Search for Azcanta in our hand as well, and Syncopate as well too. Going to go for Anticipate here, hunting for another one of our bombs. And opponent goes Blink of an Eye, trying to go for a kicker here. We actually go Syncopate for 2 here, making sure that Blink of an Eye doesn't hurt the Teferi. And hit Vraska's Contempt, again thinking that they may have a Planeswalker. Hitting 2 lands off that. Search for Azcanta, hitting the battlefield. And we don't have any counters on our side of the field, so we're kind of out of gas as far as winning the counter war here, which is not good, especially because opponent has things like Commit to Memory. Because, again, Commit to Memory can counter spells as well as bounce things from the battlefield. So Teferi's at 7. Once he hits 8 and emblems, that's basically game for the opponent. Opponent goes for metallurgic summonings, and they're kind of getting their combo together here. Hit a Drowned Catacomb with the Search for Azcanta. We hit Syncopate and another Vraska's Contempt. And again, Teferi is at 8, so we really do need to make sure that Teferi stays on the battlefield. Opponent has Blink of an Eye for 4, and we go with a Syncopate here, making sure that it does get countered. Opponent goes Negate on top of our Syncopate, and we can't do anything, so they actually win the counter war here, which means that Teferi does get blinked back into our hand. Not great. We do have 2 Vraska's Contempts and a Gideon's Reproach, though, so we decided to spin one on the Construct just to make sure that our actual board state is protected the entire time. Keep in mind we're at 22 life, they're at 20, so neither of us have really affected the other's life total at all. We're on turn 15 as well, so it's just been a really grindy matchup to make sure that whoever can, fault the most. Cast out, grabbing our Search for Azcanta. Not necessarily a bad thing. It can be bad as far as getting into our giant removal spells. Commit to Memory, hitting Teferi here. We decided to go with a Contempt on the Construct instead of playing another Teferi and pass the turn back to them. Basically just protecting our life total, because if we can win out on the counter war like this, then we should be fine. Hitting a Cast down and then a Teferi once again. 4 cards in hand, and they have another Supreme Will. But they're going to hunt for something this time and go Anticipate from Supreme Will. Basically filling their board state up with stuff in order to hit Teferi or us. And this is kind of where the match kind of gets away from us. The Anticipate once again, making a 2/2, as well as hunting for another counter magic spell. They have so much mana available to them. They have 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of mana right now. So we're just kind of waiting for that counter, but they don't actually have a counter here. We draw into our other Teferi and go Cast down on the 3/3, making sure that Teferi can survive the next attack here. So, untapping some lands on our side of the field. But again, we're kind of out of gas, just kind of waiting for the opponent to go off on their Metallurgic Summonings deck here. 8 cards in hand for them. Oh man, so many cards. They hit in at Teferi, dropping him to 1, and then playing out another Metallurgic Summonings. This is kind of the point where we get into a Golden Demise, which is actually not terrible for the situation. But of course, they have so much mana available to them and so many cards in their hand. They're also going to use Azcanta to hunt for a counter card. They find a Commit to Memory here, and they immediately spend it on the Golden Demise, making 2 4/4s, which is just backbreaking right now. We untap some stuff here. They have 3 mana available to them. Untap once more, 7 cards in hand. And then they just attack out here. I think hitting me for 10, and then hitting a Teferi for 2. Top decking Stellar Wreckage here, our 1 copy of, is actually kind of amazing. We hit Teferi and just go with the +1 here. Hitting Golden Demise as well. Try to go Golden Demise, weakening their board state just a little bit. But opponent is really not having it with the Commit to Memory. Just making their board state a lot larger, meaning that if they do have a counter for the Stellar Wreckage here, then that's basically going to be game here. They attack out, and yeah, basically they have so many cards in hand that I would be surprised if they did not have a counter to the Stellar Wreckage. Nevertheless, we're still going to play it out once they decide to swing out. And they do, and then we go Stellar Wreckage, and they have a Negate, and that's going to do it for Game 1. Man, that was a long Game 1. So Game 2 here, we're bringing in Stellar Wreckage, bringing in Invoke the Divine, taking out Essence Scatter, and taking out Lyra Dawnbringer, bringing in Chromium and Nezahal, and taking out Azor and Teferi, with the cast downs coming out, and just kind of saying, okay, that's probably going to do it for us. And we'll see what we can do in Game 2. Try and make sure we can come back from behind here. Do take out both of the Golden Demises here, since they're not that useful in this particular matchup. They are good at being able to kind of counter these smaller summonings tokens, but not the larger ones. Kind of have a terrible opening hand, but because we're up against another control list, this is actually pretty good because we have a Chromium on turn 7, almost guaranteed thanks to our 5 mana here. Anticipate and Syncopate being good for us as well. Opponent using Anticipate to hunt as well. Waiting for the opponent to just catch up on mana, just like we're doing. Invoke the Divine is the card we pick off the top here. Because of the summonings as well as the cast outs. Renegade map from opponent. 4 mana on the battlefield, and we have 6 mana overall. Hitting our 5th mana. 7th card for opponents playing another land, another Field of Ruin. We have enough for a Teferi, but we're not really going to worry about that. We're just going to worry about the Chromium here. We play an Irrigated Farmlands, and we play an Isolated Chapel. Hit our 7th land on turn 7 and play a Chromium. Can't be countered, flash, and can definitely be a Hexproof creature if we need it to be. However, opponent really doesn't blink because they go with a Supreme Will here, looking for something. And because they're blue-white, I'm kind of assuming they might have a Fumigate. I'm just going, please don't have a Fumigate. That would really suck because Chromium is amazing. And they, of course, have a Fumigate. Not good for us. So they do tap out for that, and we go for Teferi and just plus on Teferi. So not bad here. Playing a Swamp. Blink of an Eye for that. We go Syncopate for 1 here and pass turn for opponent. Untapping some mana. Holding up another Syncopate if we need to, or an Invoke the Divine, since Invoke the Divine is an instant speed spell for cards like Cast Out that they just cast here. We're trying to go for a Syncopate first to just slow them down a little bit. They go Supreme Will there. Cast Out the Teferi. And we have Anticipate and Invoke the Divine. We're going to hunt for a land, play that out, and Invoke the Divine, the Cast Out, getting some life back, drawing a card, and passing turn once again. 4 cards in opponent's hand, playing Evolving Wilds here, trying to set up their lands again. They have another Cast Out on their turn here. Playing Cast Out on your turn is a little annoying, since it does put you behind if you're control. So the opponent has 3 cards in hand, and we're kind of at a weird stalemate situation where they just need to make sure Teferi doesn't go up in points anymore. But we continue to gain momentum. Negate here for us. Commit on that Teferi. We negate that. They go for an Anticipate, trying to find a negate. They don't find it, I don't believe. 3 cards in hand. And now we're just kind of in a really good position now. And that's actually going to do it. So we're getting into game 3 here. Lots of stuff that's really good for us here. We do take out Gideon's Reproach and bring in Cast Down since it's a better matchup against the Metallurgic Summoning stack. And go into game 3. Have a decent opening hand. And go with a keep here, thanks to a turn 2 Search for Azcanta, negate, or Cast Down if we need to. Renegade Map from opponent. Going to go with a tap Isolated Chapel and pass turn. And a Plains from opponent. Going to go Search for Azcanta. You'll notice we're playing a little bit faster now, since we just both hit the 10-minute mark. Island for opponent here. Search for Azcanta is going to start doing some good work for us. We're going to make sure we draw as many lands as possible, because Nezahal needs to come in as soon as possible. Hopefully on turn 7 if we can help it. Anticipate from opponent here. 5 cards in hand. Hitting another. Laying out their 4th land, so let's see here. Search for Azcanta finds a Syncopate. We throw that to the graveyard to make sure we get another land. Our problem here, though, is that we only have 1 blue mana source. So we could go with a negate here on Blink of an Eye, but we could see something else hit that Search for Azcanta. So we actually opt for it to go back to our hand and wait to see a blue mana. 5 cards in hand for opponent. They go with a pass turn here. Now, this is kind of the part where we really need to get a second blue mana source, and we don't find it for like 3 or 4 turns. Get another Search for Azcanta, getting up to 8 cards in hand here. And we need to discard a card. We're going to discard a Cast Down. Actually, a Search for Azcanta first. In between all that, they had a Cast Down cycle. Got another negate. We're going to discard that Cast Down. Have to Settle the Wreckage, and we're going to discard that second Cast Down. Trying to get into mana as much as we can. Get into our 4th negate, which is just ludicrous. On turn 9. Evolving Wilds for our opponent here. They continue to gain momentum, but really aren't playing anything. 8 cards in hand. And the best thing for us is that once we hit 7 mana, Nezahal is actually a can't-be-countered card, and we have a lot of cards to be able to blink Nezahal, so we're not really worried about what we actually are doing here. We're just kind of making sure we get to 7 mana and can start attacking in. Search for Azcanta hitting the battlefield. Now, it can turn on immediately on their next upkeep, so good for them. 5 cards in hand for them. Really need 1 more mana if we can help it. They have 6 mana right now. That was my phone going off. Passing it back to the opponent here. Drowned Catacombs is our 7th land, and we go Nezahal. They can't counter it, so it hits the battlefield. Now, all we have to worry about is bounce spells, cast outs, and fumigates, those kind of things. So, because we have 6 cards in hand, and every time they cast a non-creature spell, we actually draw an extra card, we get some gas here. So, they try to go with commit. We discard 3 cards, blinking Nezahal, and then they go with a, I think it's a hunt here for Search for Azcanta. Yeah, they go search for Azcanta here and find another commit to memory. So they actually have a second commit to memory whenever they untap here. Keep in mind, Nezahal is a 7/7, so it's really only a 3-turn attacker, which means that if they can't deal with Nezahal, if it hits them 3 times, and that's going to be game. They untap and immediately go for a Fumigate. We draw a card off of that, get an Anticipate, and go for the Blink once again. It's just super good here for us. We decide to get rid of the Teferi, the Anticipate, and a Negate. And they go commit off of Nezahal. And because we draw a card once again, we go Blink in response. Now, they're just in desperation mode, making sure that Nezahal doesn't hit them. But we have cards forever and hit Chromium off the top. And since they just used Fumigate, we know they don't have another Fumigate in hand. Hit them for 7. And we actually have the game next turn if they don't have any removal. They go Azcanta hunting for something and find a blink of an eye, which means they can bounce the Nezahal or Chromium this turn or the following turn. Now, if they do go with the blink here, they need to be targeting Nezahal. They are targeting Nezahal, which is good. And we draw a card from that, Drowned Catacombs, and get another land. We're just going to replay Nezahal here because we really want to be able to gain card draw if they start using it, or if they start using spells against Chromium. They just hit the 5-minute mark. We hit in for 7. They're down to 6. Opponent has 7 cards in hand. And they go for a Fumigate here, which makes us draw another card with Nezahal. We decide to go for another blink because we have nothing to lose at this point in the game. They do go up to 7 because the Chromium does die. They go Supreme Will looking for something, and they don't find anything, and that is going to do it. But that is it for the deck tech, guys. I really hope you appreciated that. Let's get into some matches and see how this deck does. I love me some good mirror matches. All right, that is it for the matches, guys. Hope you did like the video. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And make sure to check out whenever I stream on Twitch every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And I'll have the link in the comments down below, guys. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next video. The next deck tech will be a blue-red Wizards rotation-proof list as well. So look forward to that, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.